Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Anna. Anna, welcome to the show. Thank you for sparing time for us today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah. Could you introduce yourself to the listeners, please, Anna?
Yes. So I am the director of programs at Fostering Hope, and we are in Austin, Texas. My kind of story in this whole field of adoption and foster care started about 9 years ago or so, when I was a caregiver for teen girls at a children's home. And before that, I had been a teacher, and I thought, this is going to be very similar to teaching high school, but I quickly found out that it wasn't. There's just a lot of things I didn't know about their history and how that had impacted them. So that kind of launched me into understanding trauma and learning more about trauma and how that impacts one's present. I was able to use a lot of trauma-informed responses and parenting strategies with the girls. And in the span of 5 years, I took care of 17 teenage girls. But now I really focus on the caregiver of kids who have experienced adversity, whether that's, the parent, the teacher, the professional, whoever it is that's working with the kids and the teens, because I was there and I know what that feels like. And I know how it could be very difficult in caring for kids. So I'm really passionate about helping them understand the child they serve and they love, and how they can really be a healing agent in their life. So that's what I do now.
Yeah. How many teens did you say, teen girls?
17 teen girls in a span of 5 years. So I had anywhere from 2 to 10 girls at a time. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you had your hands full, definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah. The thing that pops into my head, a strange one, is like, just as a teen boy, I was always trying to figure out how teen girls thought.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to read my sister's, the magazines that she got, the teen girl magazines, hoping that would give me some inside line. But they.
Oh yeah, I wish it was that easy.
They remained a mystery.
I wish it was that easy. Yeah. It was, it was a lot of fun, and then it's like the added component of what they had experienced in their life, and for many years before I even came into their life. So yeah.
So when we were talking last time, we came up with this topic of helping parents. So this is going to be a parent-focused, adopted parent-focused episode. And we're talking about how parents can kind of be better self-regulated themselves. I said self twice there. Because the more grounded we are, anybody is in a relationship, the better chance that we're going to have of helping the other person in the relationship.
Right.
So why is this important? And because it kind of, traditionally, it's been about, this area has been about parenting strategies, hasn't it? Or it's been about, it's all been focused on the kids. We've adopted because of the kids. So all the focus has been on the kids, not on ourselves. So why are things shifting? Why have we picked up? Why did you think that this topic was such a good one to go for?
Yeah, I think, you said something key, that parenting is like a relationship. And I think we forget that sometimes. And a key component of that is that when you're in a relationship, you bring yourself to that, right? There's two people that bring themselves into that relationship that have something to add. So the parent always brings something to the table with their relationship with the child. They bring their own background, right? They bring their own stressors, those obstacles that keep them from connecting with the child. And the child has, their own things that they bring to the relationship. So it's interesting that you said we tend to focus on what the child brings. And if we're talking about adoption, right, we know the child brings their adversity and their history and those things that have impacted their body, their brain, their belief system. But the parent also brings that. And that's a little bit harder to realize as parents, right? To be mindful of that. And we have this saying in our field that a dysregulated brain cannot regulate another dysregulated brain. So if you think about maybe those power struggles that we sometimes get into with our kids, or the times where we're frustrated and we're deep into a situation or an issue with a child, and the first thing that needs to happen to help that child is to help them regulate. But if we're not regulated, if we're not okay, if we haven't done the work of in ourselves, right, there's no way that we're going to be able to help that child regulate. So yeah, I think it's really important for the parent to even start there, to recognize what they bring into the relationship.
Yeah. So you use that phrase, doing the work. Clearly, this is a conversation. We're having a conversation. We're not delivering a therapy session to the parents.
Right.
And doing the work. One of the key ways that people do the work is through their own through therapy. Given those limitations, what can you share to help our listeners regulate themselves better?
Yeah, there's a lot, and I'm trying to, form a simplistic way or explanation of this. But once, in my experience, this is usually what happens with parents, right? And it definitely happened to me. Once we realize what our child needs, and our child who comes from adversity, who has been adopted, is going to need a different type of parenting strategy, right? Research shows us that their brain many times is basically programmed in a different way because of what they've experienced. So once we learn that they need something different, then we can look at, well, how do I give them that? How do I give them that strategy, that connection? How do I use that with them? And we'll begin to see that some of these things are going to be difficult for us to implement. And then we ask the question, why? Does it have to do with how I was parented? Does it have to do with what I experienced as a child, what I experienced in a different relationship? Does it have to do with my parenting style and my belief system in that? With my attachment style, how I do relationships in general, any relationship. And when we start asking ourselves, why is this difficult for me? And recognizing and realizing what we bring to that, that's when we can start to work on those specific, things that come up from our own past.
So it's a self-awareness. It's a self-awareness exploration, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
What I heard something on. I heard some. Don't wish. I heard a great phrase. So great, I can't remember it. Don't wish life was easier. Wish you were better. Right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, so I'm in this place. I want to be a better human being, be a better parent. be calmer, lose my rag less, we would say in the UK.
Yeah.
Lose it less. So it's about maybe some quiet reflection on, what is this bringing up for me? Can I make some connections between what's going on internally for me
Mm-hmm.
on the back of the behavior that I'm seeing in my child?
Yeah, and you hit something really, really key there. Like we have behaviors too as parents, and I think sometimes we forget that. And a lot of when I'm training parents and coaching them, I always, I repeat this over and over, and I just wish I could give parents this gift all the time of being able to see the why behind the behavior. Like, why is my child acting this way? Because I really think that increases our compassion and our tolerance. But the same thing is true for us, right? Can we see the why behind our behaviors? Like, why did I just lose it there? Why did I just explode? Why couldn't I remain calm? Is this bringing up anything for me? And I think that's key. And the more we understand, I teach parents to understand how the brain works in their child, but also it works the same way for us. And the more we can understand a little bit of how that works. And I think sometimes we do, though. We don't realize it's the same kind of concept for us. And it's a great aha moment when a parent can realize and say, oh, I was in my fear brain too, right? I was operating with a threat. The child was a threat to me at that point.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to see that.
And not beating ourselves up for what we've just done.
Right? That's part of the mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is being aware of the moment, what's going on inside, but in a non-judgmental way, right? Like approaching it with curiosity and compassion, just like you would with your child who you're trying to help through a difficult situation, right? Approaching it with curiosity and compassion.
And I guess the thing is that forgiving ourselves like we would forgive our child.
Yeah.
Like I've never asked a parent that question. How good are they at that?
I think it's hard. I think there's a lot of pressure, from society, but specifically adoptive parents, there's even more pressure because their child acts differently than the typical child. And the outside looking in, the public looking in, they don't understand that. So they'll judge, they'll say, maybe it's because they don't have the right parent, they don't have the right parenting or whatever it might be. And I think there's a lot more judgment and pressure on the parent. And it's hard to let go of some of those things that society or your family or outside people tell you should be able to do or handle.
So can we give the listeners permission to forgive themselves about not being able to forgive themselves?
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, that would be a great gift for parents to be able to approach themselves with compassion, just like they would with their child.
So one of the things I've heard on this subject before is, you talked about aha moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is an aha moment when we realize it's not personal. It's not us. It's not even them, as in the kids. It's what they've been through. But it isn't personally. It isn't personal. But all human beings tend to take stuff more personally, in my opinion. Right?
Yeah, and it feels personal, right? Because like we said, you're in a relationship with them. They're living in your home. And if you think about, what you expected to happen when you adopted a child, when you brought them into their home, did you expect something different? Did you expect for them to be thankful, for them to blend well with your family, for them to fit into the family rules, whatever it might be? And then all of a sudden it's different. So it feels like kind of a threat to you, an attack to what you thought was going to happen. But when you can see how their history has impacted them, right? When you can say, like, hey, son, daughter, bud, it's me and you against your history, not me against you or you against me. And we can really take that approach. I think there could be an aha moment when we understand that, and it'll increase our compassion and our tolerance.
So can we forgive ourselves, dear listeners, for having false expectations? Can we forgive ourselves for that as well? I don't know. Can we do that?
Yeah, there's this training that I give, and I give it around the holidays, because I think many times as parents, I call it, we have like this hallmark moment of what Christmas is going to look like, or the holiday is going to look like. And we have to grieve that sometimes. Like, what if it doesn't work out that way? Because the children you welcome into your home, it doesn't, they're not cooperating with wearing the matching pajamas. They're not cooperating with eating all these new foods and, having a good time with your family. And many times we have to realize that we have that hallmark moment in our mind, but also grieve it, right? And like you said, kind of forgive ourselves, let it go for what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a little bit of a detour on that, on this, because I hear that "Let It Go" song at the swimming pool quite a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's the grown-ups like me in the big pool, and then there's a kiddie pool, and they play it as, they're playing song. They always play songs, and the kids do, they're just playing. They're not learning to swim. They're having games, right? But they're always playing "Let It Go." So here's a bit of an oddball question for you. What's the it that we have to let go?
Yeah. And I think that depends on the parent, right? What is that thing that you're holding on to? And it's basically causing maybe so much friction in your home, in your parenting, in your relationship with your child, because it hasn't been let go. And I think it's different for every parent. It could be, for some parents, it's behavioral. For some parents is, the story didn't end up the way they thought. The child, didn't heal from what they thought they were going to heal, whatever it might be. And that's a good question for each parent to answer. Is there something, that you don't like, that you can't control, that you can't change, that we can call it, that you can choose to let go?
So I'm going to make a very bold statement, and that was beautifully answered, because I had no idea how you were going to answer that question. I asked a guy at the swimming pool, because I go swimming quite a lot, and I've been going there many years, so I know a lot of the guys and the women that work there at the pool. So I asked him that, right, and he was a bit taken aback, but he came up with a really good answer, and that kind of sums up everything that you said. He said, it's a thought. So all of those things that you said are thoughts, aren't they? Right. So the one that pops into my head is that's obviously a thought is an expectation.
Yeah.
So an expectation is a thought. I mean, it's a thought about the future, and then I guess if we look at it, if we look at it in hindsight, it's an expectation that wasn't met. So it's ahead of time, it's an expectation, and after the event, it's an unmet expectation. But it's a thought. It's a thought, and like, well, what are thoughts made out of?
Mm-hmm.
We say, well, I didn't even realize it was a thing. Well, it's not a thing, is it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a thing. We live in this world where everybody's making things. They're making things up. They're making. This will go out next month. This will go out probably in January, I guess, maybe Feb. I saw something in the newspaper last week. Have you got Christmas stress? Right. So they've made up this thing.
Mm-hmm.
They've made up this thing. Oh, I didn't even know it was a thing. Oh, now it's a thing. Have I got it? Yes, that explains it. And we kind of like we jump on that. We jump on this is a bandwagon. And we believe, I didn't realize that was a thing. Oh, it is a thing. Oh, and then the mind will go looking for evidence of this thing, and what we focus on gets bigger. What we focus on, we see more of. Oh yeah, I've got Christmas stress. And it gets bigger, and it gets bigger, and it gets bigger, and it becomes more concrete. And what was it ever made out of? It was only made out of thought, but it's thought upon thought upon thought upon thought upon thought upon thought upon. It's like the domino. It's like this was a kids program I saw years ago, and they were trying to do the largest domino fall in the world, right, for the Guinness Book of World Records. So they had this BBC studio floor, it was covered in dominoes, all upright, and then somebody was going to click one, and they were going to, and the whole thing, it went, and 5,000 dominoes fell down, and the what if, that's the what if thought that has suddenly got more credibility, more stickability. So watch out for those thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that just proves our point that we bring something to it, right? Because those thoughts come from us, those expectations come from us. But also, specifically for
apart from the hormones,
right, and specifically for parents who have adopted, right? Like there's this idea, whether society tells us, culture tells us, whatever it might be, that our family has to be a certain way, that our children have to be a certain way, have to act a certain way, have to have a certain amount of success. And what if they don't? And that could be crippling. That could be hurtful, personally hurtful to us, because that was the idea we had in our mind. That was the expectation we had. But then we welcome a child into our home that has experienced adversity and trauma, and if we understand a little bit of how their brain works, like it's not that they don't want to do that, it's that they literally can't do that right now, right? They need a different type of parenting, a different maybe life path than the typical child, and that is almost compounded when we think about the adoptive family.
Yeah. So what else? Because I went on a bit there on my thought. What else do you what else are the key things that you'd like to share on this topic of parental self-regulation?
I think also something to be mindful of as parents is, are you taking care of yourself as you take care for others? Um, and I hear a lot from parents how difficult this is, and I agree, right? Like taking care of yourself, not only like the typical bubble bath that you hear that self-care is, but really taking care of how you're changing, how your worldview is changing, processing that, giving yourself what you need in order to be regulated and available for your child is super important. And that starts with even knowing what you need in order to do that, which could also be a journey.
Yeah. So a thing has popped into my head, as they do on these conversations, is like the self-care spectrum. So we've mentioned it earlier on about doing the work and therapy. Parents going to therapy is at one end of the self-care spectrum, and at the other end of the self-care spectrum, you've got the ubiquitous bubble bath. So there are different, a whole load of different options on that continuum, from bubble bath to therapy. What are the ones that parents find most effective in your experience or in your conversations with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely something to those little things that you do for yourself on a consistent basis. And I think that's key when you can do it consistently. So whether that's, taking a date night or doing a bubble bath, like those things are super important. I think what parents miss and realize later that they've missed it and how important it is the fact of processing their own experience with, it could be with a trusted friend or a professional spiritual leader, whatever works for them, but being conscious that the experiences you have with your child, which are sometimes difficult, are many times different than how you grew up or what you had experienced in the world. The stories you hear from your child, the behaviors you are in with your child, that needs to be processed. That your worldview is changing because you have different experiences now. You have different words that are being spoken to you, and that's going to change how you view the world, what you think about family and adults and kids. And I think that's what mostly gets missed, but also can be a big benefit to parents that actually do that and recognize how important that is.
Yeah. So the thing that pops into my head is obviously the people that are ahead of you on the journey, that have, people that are wiser than ourselves or more experienced than ourselves, or seem to be ahead of us on the journey, was the one that I was thinking. And can help us to that perspective, because you talked about aha moments, right? So in my take is that the whole of society is kind of obsessed with hacks and strategies and tactics. And this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine. You might have listened to any of the episodes. So we're obsessed with hacks and strategies and tactics, whereas what actually changes our lives for the better are aha moments, are insights, are epiphanies are a different perspective. So what processing our experience, I think that was the word you it was the word you used, because I wrote it down. One of the things that changes our experiences is when we have a different, we share a perspective. So we share our perspective with somebody else, and they give us their perspective on our situation back, and we are helped to a new perspective. We have a new idea, we have a new understanding, and that's what does the hard lifting in the deeper stuff, in the relationships. And once we've done the hard lifting, then the actual what to do becomes a lot clearer when we can see the wood for the trees. The higher up, the higher our mood, the higher up, the taller our perspective, the better, the clearer we can see for the wood for the trees, the better able we are to parent more effectively.
Yeah, and here's the thing, you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but it's that connective factor, right? That you said, somebody who is on the same journey as us, but maybe a little bit ahead. And we can connect in that way when we process, when we talk, when we have shared experiences. It's that connection factor that science keeps showing is so healing, that community factor. And we know that for our kids, right? We tell our parents over and over, like, we build on connection. That is the number one, connected parenting is like our number one strategy, our foundation for everything. But do we also do that for ourselves? Because it's such an important and impactful factor. Do we have that person or that community of people that we are connected to, that are on this journey with us, that we can feel like we belong somewhere, that we are seen by someone?
I think that's such a great point, because we have to go first. We are the leaders. Leaders go first in this area. Leaders develop their connection with their connectees, and then we're going to be better able to connect with our kids. I mean, it's like, is it a connection muscle? It's not a muscle, but connection, it's a felt experience, isn't it?
Right. And it gives us access to our brain. You mentioned like being able to do these strategies. That's really what it does. It gives us access to like the optimal functioning of our brain when we're connected.
Yeah. I want to demystify this perspective thing. It's because it can sound a little bit theoretical when I heard this. So you go to bed at night and you've got a problem, but you're zonked out and you're tired, so you fall asleep, and then in the morning hopefully you've had a good night's sleep, and you wake up with the answer. And that is what I mean by that's an excellent example of a shift in perspective. So going back to your point, that's probably, we've been a bit more peaceful. Our whatever the front part of the brain has been a bit quieter, means that the answer can come from the back of our brain, and bingo, and it just comes about. It was just like a magic aha moment, on the basis that we weren't grappling with the problem, we were getting a bit of rest. And I guess self-care, I mean, that self-care and sleep's got to be one of the most
I mean,
important self-care strategies, if you call it a strategy. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And if you're getting a good night's sleep, like where your heart rate is really down and you're truly relaxing, you're not in the fear part of your brain, right? You're relaxed. You can definitely sleep and be in the fear part of your brain. But I think there's also something, I mean, the example I'm thinking of in my mind is what you do every time you interview someone through a podcast, every time you connect with someone and you have these conversations and these discussions. And it's, almost as if, oh, we understand each other. I met someone else from the community. Oh, we're on the same journey. We're on the same race. We're working towards the same thing. And it shifts your perspective that you're not alone and you can keep going. And that's what I mean by even just human connection. Like, yes, it starts with being connected with yourself, but even that human connection of knowing other people in that you can build a community with that can help you continue, prompt you forward and continue to keep going.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'd never figured why I enjoy doing this podcast so much, because it is about the connection. We're connecting, we're having a interesting conversation, we're working together towards a shared aim to help our listeners with this particular topic of self-regulation. So we are coming together in the service of the listeners.
Yeah. And
So,
many times parents are isolated, right? Adoptive parents, because of maybe they don't understand their child. There's not very many people that understand them and what's going on. They feel, I mean, at least parents that come to me, they feel lost, like they don't know what else to do. And that isolates you and doesn't connect you. That's a risk. And that's really counterproductive to what you want. You want to be connected and not isolated.
Yeah, and we want to be modeling what we want from our kids, right? So just somebody said to me that we heal in connection.
Right.
Adoptees, kids from tough places, kids from the foster care system, they heal in connection. So we need to be doing. We need to be. Sorry, the only thing I can think of is a bit of a pompous quote, really, because it's Gandhi. Be the change that you want to see in the world. But well, not pompous, but a little bit highbrow and then maybe a little bit theoretical. But that's what we want, right? Kids don't. Well, nobody follows a hypocrite, right?
Right.
You've got to walk the talk, not just talk.
Yeah, and our kids heal in connection, but so do we, right? We're talking about how our brains operate in the same way. So if we're having a hard time, if we're struggling, if we that connection could really be beneficial, just like it would be for a child that we're parenting.
Yeah. Wow. What else would you like to share on this, Anna?
I could go any way. I think we've said a lot, and I would reiterate and just highlight that if we could understand the whys behind our own behaviors and what we bring to that relationship, and then work on understanding ourselves, work on meeting our own needs, staying in community, staying connected, processing, right, some of that self-care, then we will be able to be even more of what our children need. And I think we sometimes are backwards in the thinking, like we focus on our kids. What do our kids need? Let me do that. first, and we kind of deplete ourselves because we're not starting from the source, which is us, right? We're not starting and filling up the source. So if we could just switch that a little bit in how we think, oh, that would be such a gift for parents, I think.
That's the aha moment that we want for you, is it's about you first.
Yeah.
So I want to, so the why behind behavior, right? So want to give people a really simple model for this. Behaviors are driven by feelings. So upstream of behaviors, we've got feelings. And upstream of feelings, what causes feelings is thoughts. Mm-hmm. So there's a thought somewhere, it may be a subconscious thought that's driving our kids, or it's driving our feelings, mm-hmm. or our kids' feelings. And those feelings are driving their behavior. So that's just a really simple 3-step model. So what's going on? What's the feeling behind? What's the feeling behind the behavior, and the thought behind the feeling?
Mm-hmm. And I think for our kids who have experienced adversity, who have experienced trauma, we have to keep that in mind, right? Because some of their thoughts and their feelings are not going to make sense to us. They're not going to be typical thoughts and feelings. And we'll definitely see that play out in how, in their relationship with us, right? And their behaviors with us as well.
So it's, what do people say? It's a normal reaction to an abnormal event. So it's a normal behavior on the back of an abnormal feeling, or an abnormal thought, or an abnormal event.
Right. It's what their experience has taught them, and how their experience has programmed their brain, their reactions to be.
Yeah. So we have covered a lot. I think we've given people enough to think about here. Mm-hmm. Are there any last points you'd like to perhaps bring up, or if we?
I think that was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without being too overwhelming.
Good. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Anna, and thank you, listeners, for listening. And we will speak to you all very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.